He accessed the ship's damaged archives, pulling up human historical texts captured during the initial intelligence gathering. What he found chilled his 3 hearts: accounts of species humans had driven to extinction on their own world, not through superior technology, but through relentless, generations-long hunting pressure. One phrase from an ancient human text burned itself into his consciousness, and they followed the mammoths across continents, across generations, until none remained. With sudden clarity, Zakthar understood what the Council did not. The hegemony had not merely encountered an unusually resilient species. They had awakened a force of nature. A species evolved to pursue prey to extinction, no matter the cost or time required. "The Omega Protocol will fail," he whispered to the empty air. "And then they will come for us. Not for our worlds or resources, but because we hunted them first." The Annihilation Fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, 9 obsidian behemoths arranged in a sacred geometric pattern that had heralded the end of civilizations throughout the galaxy. Each vessel housed a singularity core capable of collapsing a planet's tectonic stability, transforming habitable worlds into asteroid fields within hours. Fleet Admiral Vex Maiden stood on the command deck of the flagship Inevitable Terminus, surveying the tactical display with all 6 eyes. Earth hung in the center of the projection, a blue jewel already scared by 2 months of conventional warfare. "Commence deployment sequence," he ordered, his voice carrying the ceremonial intonation required for planet-killing operations. "May the universe forgive our necessity." The 9 vessels began their ritual positioning, spreading to form a perfect nonagon around the planet. The singularity cores pulsed with building energy, creating gravitational distortions that rippled through spacetime itself. "Gravitic anomalies detected throughout the system," reported his sensor officer. "The human planet's core is already responding to preliminary resonance fields." Vex Medin performed the ceremonial gesture of regretful necessity. In 18 minutes, Earth would begin breaking apart from the inside. In 27, nothing would remain but dust and echoes. "Unknown vessels detected." The sensor officer's voice shifted to alarm harmonics. "Multiple signatures emerging from lunar orbit, asteroid belt, and directly beneath us." The tactical display transformed as hundreds of human ships appeared where moments before sensors had detected nothing. Some were the crude retrofit vessels first encountered during the boarding actions. Others were entirely new designs that incorporated hegemony technology in ways that violated conventional engineering principles. "Impossible," Vex Medin whispered. "They couldn't have produced this many vessels in such a short time." "Message incoming from human flagship," the communications officer reported, confusion evident in his harmonics. The holographic projector flickered, then displayed a human female in a military uniform bearing the insignia of Lieutenant General Maria Hernandez, Earth Defense Forces. Her expression contained something the Admiral had never seen in prey species facing extinction: absolute predatory certainty. "This is humanity's one and only communication to your Annihilation Fleet," she stated, her voice translated by systems clearly adapted from hegemony technology. "We have mapped your formation. We have studied your planet-killer technology. We have prepared accordingly." The tactical display updated again, showing human vessels taking precision positions to disrupt the sacred geometry required for the planet-killing gravitational resonance. "You have 30 seconds to power down your singularity cores and surrender," Hernandez continued. "Or we will demonstrate what happens when you corner a species that has never learned how to give up." Vex Medin's secondary heart fluttered with unfamiliar emotion. "Maintain deployment sequence," he ordered. "The humans are bluffing. No species has ever countered the Annihilation Protocol." 20 seconds, Hernandez stated calmly. The vast emptiness of space rippled as reality itself seemed to tear open. Through the luminescent wound in the void emerged the hegemony's 14th subjugation fleet, 17 massive ships that resembled living geometric nightmares of obsidian and bioluminescent azure. Their hulls weren't built so much as grown, each vessel a perfect amalgamation of technology and engineered biology that had conquered 1,000 worlds. Commander Zakthar stood on the command deck of the inevitable Dominion, his primary heart beating lazily, while his secondary and tertiary hearts remained in energy conservation mode. This was, after all, merely a routine conquest. His 6 amber eyes, arranged in a perfect hexagon on his elongated face, blinked in sequence as he studied the holographic representation of the unremarkable blue-green planet before him. Another water world, he remarked, mandibles clicking with mild disappointment. At least the mineral composition shows promise. Behind him, Sub-Commander Vexcroll bowed, her exoskeleton creaking slightly. The preliminary scans indicate the dominant species has achieved rudimentary spaceflight and nuclear capabilities, Commander. Classification: Pre-integration Stage 2. Zakthar's upper eyes narrowed while his lower ones remained fixed on Earth's hologram. Pre-integration Stage 2 meant the species was technically spacefaring, but hadn't yet achieved practical interplanetary colonization. Barely worth the hegemony's notice except for the planet's resources. Orbital habitats, he asked, more from protocol than interest. Primitive stations, no defensive capabilities worth mentioning. Their most advanced weapons could not penetrate even our atmospheric shuttle shielding. Vexcrawl's voice conveyed the closest her species could manage to amusement. They appear to be fractured into competing territorial units rather than presenting a unified planetary governance. Zakthar's mouthparts formed the hegemony gesture of dismissal. Standard approach then. Dispatch Vexlor for the formal surrender request. Prepare 3 subjugation battalions. That should be more than sufficient. In his private quarters later, Zakthar added Earth to his collection of conquest trophies, a shelf containing 312 small crystal orbs, each preserving a perfect miniature landscape from a world he had personally brought under hegemony control. He placed the empty Earth orb at the end of the row, ready to be filled once the conquest was complete. This would be conquest number 313, an unremarkable addition to his illustrious career. Simultaneously in Washington, D.C., Moscow, and Beijing, the air shimmered as though reality itself was being rewritten. From the distortion stepped a being that human minds struggled to process, 9 feet tall with an iridescent exoskeleton that constantly shifted colors beneath translucent chitin. Vexlor, the hegemony's premier diplomatic interface, stood before the leaders of Earth's most powerful nations, having bypassed all security through technology that might as well have been magic to human understanding. In perfect, unnaturally modulated English, Russian, and Mandarin, Vexlor spoke to the stunned humans. Your world has been cataloged by the glorious hegemony, unifiers of 1,000 systems and benefactors to all sentient life. You are offered the privilege of integration. The alien's voice emerged not from its body but from the air around it, a perfect acoustic projection. Your species will be preserved as a client race. 20% of your population will be relocated to resource extraction colonies. Your cultural artifacts of significance will be archived before reorganization. Your compliance is appreciated, but not required. As security forces surrounded the alien with weapons drawn, Vexlor's carapace rippled with patterns that human eyes registered as vaguely threatening. A holographic display materialized in the air, showing worlds burning, civilizations falling. This is not a negotiation. This is a courtesy. The alternative to acceptance is biological and cultural extinction. In the White House Situation Room, the president's face hardened as she studied the impossible being before her. And if we refuse? Vexlor's translator device emitted a sound that might have been laughter. Refusal is illogical. Your species lacks the technological capacity to resist even our preliminary forces. What happened next contradicted every psychological model in the hegemony's vast databases. Instead of fear, instead of resignation, the human leader's expressions shifted towards something the alien's sensory apparatus couldn't quite categorize. Their pupils dilated, but not with terror. Their heart rates increased, but not in panic. Tell your commander, the Russian president said evenly. that humanity does not surrender. The Chinese president nodded in agreement. We would rather die on our feet than live on our knees. The American president stepped forward, her voice steady. You've clearly conquered many worlds, but you've never encountered humans before. That was your first mistake. Vexilor's translator struggled with concepts it had never needed to process before. The notion of choosing certain annihilation over beneficial subjugation violated all established response patterns. For the first time in its long diplomatic career, the alien felt an unfamiliar sensation ripple through its neural network. Uncertainty. Commander Zakthar was enjoying a nutrient bath when the alert chimed. He emerged, dripping with opalescent fluid, and activated his neural interface. Vexilor's report scrolled through his consciousness, causing all three of his hearts to synchronize in surprise. They'd refused, he said aloud to his empty chamber. Such a response from a pre-integration stage to civilization was unprecedented. A flicker of something, not quite concern, perhaps curiosity, passed across his features as he gave the order that had subdued hundreds of worlds before. Deploy the first wave. Let us educate the primitives. Little did he know that this routine conquest was about to become the hegemony's greatest nightmare. The hegemony dropships descended through Earth's atmosphere, their hulls glowing with the friction of entry, but impervious to the primitive missile defenses humanity desperately launched against them. 12 ships, each carrying a battalion of bioengineered warriors, targeted major population centers with clinical precision. New York, Tokyo, Lagos. This was not an extermination, merely a demonstration of futility to expedite surrender. From his command throne aboard the inevitable Dominion, Zakthar monitored the invasion with idle disinterest. He sipped from a ceremonial chalice filled with a stimulant fluid traditional for hegemony commanders to consume during conquests. The liquid's luminescent blue matched the holographic displays showing the deployment of his forces. Planetary communications networks still active? He asked, mandibles clicking with mild curiosity. Yes, Commander. Sub-Commander Vexcrawl replied. As per standard protocol, we've left their information systems intact to ensure they witness their defeat and communicate their surrender. Zakthar's mouthparts arranged themselves into the gesture of approval. Excellent. This should be concluded before the third rotation. Prepare integration protocols. The first indication that something was wrong came 27 minutes later. Commander, Vexcrawl's voice held an unfamiliar note. Battalion 6 reports unexpected resistance in the Tokyo sector. Zakthar's secondary heart pulsed briefly. Elaborate. The holographic display shifted to show footage from a hegemony warrior's visual feed. The scene was chaotic. Soldiers of the local military had formed a defensive perimeter not around their command centers or escape routes, but around the hegemony's landing zone. They were attacking the dropships themselves. Curious strategy, Zakthar remarked. Futile, but curious. The footage showed a Japanese colonel rallying his troops to charge directly into hegemony fire. The humans fell by dozens, but they kept advancing, using their own dead as cover. When they reached the perimeter, they detonated explosives, killing themselves along with the alien forces. Zakthar set down his chalice. Similar reports from Lagos and New York sectors. Commander, Vexcrawl reported, her carapace pulsing with confusion patterns. Casualty rates among our forces are 17% and rising. 17%. Zakthar's 6 eyes blinked asynchronously in surprise. Against a pre-integration stage 2, Sergeant Elena Vasquez crouched behind the shattered remains of a New York subway entrance, her uniform soaked with blood. Most of it hers. She had watched her entire squad get vaporized by weapons that defied comprehension. Yet here she was, still fighting. The alien warriors moved with unsettling precision, their armor seeming to flow like liquid metal as they advanced. Elena's hand tightened around the severed appendage she'd managed to claim from a fallen alien. The limb was still twitching, its surface covered in what appeared to be both technological and biological components. She'd observed how the aliens activated their weapons, a specific neural impulse transmitted through touch-sensitive areas on their arms. "Worth a try," she muttered, pressing her thumb against the pulsing node on the severed limb. To her astonishment, it responded, interfacing with the alien weapon she dragged into her hiding place. When the next group of 3 alien soldiers moved past her position, Elena emerged from cover and fired. The weapon discharged a spiral of energy that tore through the aliens' armor as though it were paper. Their bodies convulsed, exoskeletons cracking open to reveal pulsating internal organs that rapidly necrotized on contact with Earth's atmosphere. Elena laughed, a harsh, blood-flecked sound that would have disturbed even her fellow soldiers. But it was nothing compared to the effect it had on the 4th alien who had just rounded the corner and witnessed the scene. The hegemony warrior's sensory apparatus registered something unprecedented in its combat experiences, a primitive using hegemony technology against its creators and exhibiting pleasure response while conducting lethal operations. The alien hesitated. A fatal mistake. Elena's second shot reduced it to component atoms. By the 8th hour of the invasion, Zakthar's command center had descended into barely controlled chaos. Casualty reports flooded in from all landing zones, each more incomprehensible than the last. 34% losses in Lagos, 41% in New York. Tokyo Battalion requesting emergency extraction. Zakthar stood abruptly, his ceremonial chalice crashing to the deck. The stimulant fluid spread across the polished surface like blue blood. Extraction. We are the hegemony. We do not retreat from primitives. Vexkrell's exoskeleton vibrated with stress. Commander, the humans are not following any known combat doctrine. They're not retreating. Even when outmatched, they're advancing. They're sacrificing themselves deliberately to inflict maximum casualties. The tactical display showed human forces not dispersing from alien landing zones, but converging on them. Civilian structures were being converted to barricades. Construction equipment was being weaponized. Even children were participating, serving as spotters and messengers. What species behaves this way? Zakthar demanded of no one in particular. What evolutionary path produces creatures that override self-preservation instincts to this degree? For the first time in his 300-year military career, Commander Zakthar felt something unfamiliar settle into his 3 hearts. Doubt. "Summon the War Council," he ordered, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. This will not be conquest number 313. Deep within the research vessel Empirical Certainty, Dr. Nail Vesh moved with uncharacteristic agitation among the examination chambers. The hegemony's foremost xenobiologist had studied over 300 sentient species during her 2-century career, but never had she encountered specimens like these. The humans lay in transparent analysis pods, their vital signs monitored by equipment that could detect neural activity down to the individual synapse. Most were sedated, but some remained conscious, subjects of psychological evaluation rather than physiological dissection. Increased the fear stimulus to level 8. Nalvesh instructed her assistant, her 4 arms manipulating holographic controls with practiced precision. Her serpentine neck curved toward the nearest examination pod, where a human female, a soldier captured in Lagos, was experiencing a targeted neurological assault designed to stimulate terror responses. The human's vital signs spiked, heart rate accelerating, adrenal glands flooding her system with stress hormones. But where any rational species would shut down, this creature's brain activity intensified. Frontal lobe activity increased by 38%. Problem-solving centers activated. "Impossible," Nalvesh whispered, her scales flushing a pale blue in disbelief. "Increased to level 9. The assistant hesitated. "Level 9 has caused neural collapse in all previous subject species, Doctor. Do it." As the fear stimulus intensified, the human's eyes snapped open. Instead of the vacant stare of a mind retreating from terror, they focused directly on Nalvesh with unsettling clarity. Then the human did something that would haunt the xenobiologist's dreams for years to come. She smiled. The council requires explanation. Dr. Nalvesh. The holographic projections of 17 hegemony high counselors loomed over the research chamber. Commander Zakthar reports unprecedented resistance. Your preliminary findings were due 6 hours ago. Nalvesh's scales had lost their luster, her normally immaculate laboratory coat stained with fluids both alien and familiar. She hadn't rested since the specimens arrived. Counselors, I required additional verification. My initial findings seemed impossible. Her trembling hands activated the central display, projecting evolutionary charts, neural scans, and behavioral analyses. Humans are apex predators. The statement hung in the air like a death sentence. Impossible, one counselor barked. No predator species has ever achieved technological civilization. The aggressive instincts prevent the cooperation necessary for. I understand the evolutionary models, Counselor, Nalvesh interrupted, protocol forgotten in her distress. But humans are different. They developed cooperation not despite their predatory nature, but because of it. They formed hunting packs that became tribes, then nations. She displayed footage of human history, warfare, sports, competition. Their entire culture celebrates their predatory heritage. What we classify as entertainment, they call horror. They deliberately expose themselves to fear stimuli for pleasure. The neural scans expanded, showing comparative analyses between human brains and those of hegemony species. When we experience fear, our cognitive functions diminish to allow for escape. When humans experience fear, their problem-solving abilities enhance. They don't flee from threats. They overcome them. A new recording appeared, test subjects exposed to psychological warfare tactics that had broken countless species before. The humans responded with increased aggression, creativity, and cohesion. Most disturbing, Nalvesh continued, her voice barely steady. Humans can function in pain states that would incapacitate any hegemony species. They can sustain injuries that should be immediately fatal and continue fighting. They have redundant biological systems. They can survive blood loss exceeding 40% of total volume. The oldest counselor leaned forward, his ancient eyes narrowing. Your conclusion, Doctor. Nalvesh's scales paled further. The hegemony has made a grave error. We've spent millennia conquering prey species. For the first time, we are at war with predators. An alarm blared, cutting through the stunned silence. Security breach in Containment Sector 7. A voice announced. Human test subjects have escaped. Nalvesh's assistant burst into the chamber, ichor leaking from a wound in his thorax. They're using the ventilation systems, improvising weapons from medical equipment, working together with minimal communication. The holographic counselors flickered as the ship's power fluctuated. They're not escaping. Nalvesh realized, horror dawning in her eyes. They're hunting. Security footage appeared on the displays. Escaped prisoners moving through alien corridors with predatory efficiency. They didn't run in panic or hide from patrols. They set ambushes. They created diversions. They communicated with hand signals and expressions indecipherable to hegemony monitoring systems. The lead human, the female soldier who had smiled, looked directly into a security sensor. She made a cutting motion across her throat, then pointed at the camera. For the first time in her life, Dr. Nalvesh understood true fear. Stars help us, she whispered. We didn't invite monsters into our laboratories. We invaded their world. The Void Dancers have never known defeat, Zakthar announced to his war council, mandibles extended in the hegemony expression of absolute certainty. 3,000 engagements across 700 worlds. They will end this anomaly. 3 weeks had passed since first contact, and the invasion that should have concluded in hours had become a bloody stalemate. The holograms floating around the command chamber told the story. 58% casualties among standard forces, 23 dropships lost, and most disturbing, 8 hegemony warriors captured alive. The elite Void Dancers were the hegemony's ultimate military asset, warriors genetically engineered for conquest, their nervous systems rewired to experience pleasure instead of fear when facing danger. They had broken civilizations technologically centuries ahead of Earth. Against primitives, they would be unstoppable. Deploy them to the Siberian defense zone, Zakthar ordered. That is where the humans have shown the most coordinated resistance. As the council dispersed, Sub-Commander Vexcrawl remained. Commander Dr. Nailvesh's research vessel has gone silent. Zakthar's secondary heart stuttered. Mechanical failure. The last transmission mentioned a containment breach. Security footage shows the human test subjects hunting the crew. For the first time, Zakthar felt all three hearts beat in perfect, terrified synchrony. Professor Chen worked from a makeshift wheelchair, his lab coat draped over the stumps where his legs had been before the initial bombardment of MIT. Around him, the underground bunker hummed with desperate activity. Physicists, engineers, and soldiers working alongside civilians in a frenetic race against extinction. The breakthrough isn't in copying their technology, Chen explained to General Rivera, who had flown in from what remained of the Pentagon. It's in understanding its weaknesses. He gestured toward the salvaged alien components spread across the reinforced tables. Look at the elegance. Each system perfectly designed with no redundancy. Beautiful, but fundamentally flawed. Chen rolled to a holographic display showing scans of hegemony armor. Their shielding is calibrated against energy weapons and high-velocity projectiles. But primitive kinetic impacts, hand-to-hand combat, they considered those too obsolete to defend against. He picked up what looked like a modified combat knife. This is steel, simple carbon steel, with an ultrasonic vibration module salvaged from their own medical equipment. Their armor can't process the frequency. It passes through their shields like they don't exist. General Rivera's weathered face broke into a grim smile. How many can we produce? Thousands within 48 hours. Every machine shop in North America is being converted. Chen's eyes gleamed with predatory satisfaction. They expected us to try beating them with their own weapons. They never considered we might beat them with ours. Captain Ivanov clutched the crude but effective alien-human hybrid weapon as his small band of Russian special forces trudged through the Siberian snow. Temperatures had plummeted to -40 degrees, cold that killed the invaders whose biotechnology couldn't handle extreme temperatures. "They're coming," his scout reported, returning to their position in the narrow mountain pass. At least 200, different from the others, moving faster, more coordinated. Ivanov nodded grimly. "The elites we were warned about." "Good." He activated his radio. "All units, Operation Avalanche is go." "I repeat, Operation Avalanche is go." His 23 soldiers moved into predetermined positions, a suicidal last stand against overwhelming force. But winning wasn't the objective. The Void Dancers emerged from the swirling snow like nightmares. 3-meter-tall warriors with carapaces that shifted colors to match their surroundings. They moved with unnatural grace, their weapons integrated directly into their limbs. Ivanov's forces opened fire, their modified weapons temporarily effective. The Void Dancers faltered momentarily, then adapted, their armor shifting to counter the hybrid technology. They advanced inexorably up the mountain pass. "Fall back," Ivanov ordered as planned, his forces retreating toward the prepared position, a narrow box canyon with no exit. The Void Dancers followed, their biotech sensors detecting the humans' heat signatures through the blizzard. When the last of Ivanov's soldiers had entered the canyon and the Void Dancers were fully committed to the pursuit, he squeezed the detonator. The mountain roared. Precisely placed charges, developed from studying hegemony explosive technology, triggered an avalanche that engulfed both humans and aliens alike. 2 hours later, in the command center of the inevitable Dominion, Zakthar received the report with all 6 eyes wide in disbelief. "The Void Dancers are gone. All of them." "Worse, Commander," Vexcrawl's voice trembled. 17 human life signs have been detected emerging from the avalanche zone. They used the thermal regulation systems from our fallen warriors to survive. A transmission cut through the stunned silence. A video feed showing surviving Russian soldiers examining the broken bodies of void dancers, methodically stripping them of technology. The humans are broadcasting this deliberately, Vexcroll whispered, to every one of our ships. For the first time in the history of the hegemony, Commander Zakthar uttered the words no conquest commander had ever spoken. We need to reconsider our approach. Deploy the Mind Eater. The Hegemony Council's order arrived with the gravity of a death sentence. In 10,000 years of conquest, the Mind Eater had only been authorized 17 times, and only as a last resort against civilizations whose technology approached hegemony levels. Never against primitives. Zakthar's command staff watched in reverent silence as the sacred weapon was brought aboard the inevitable dominion by psychic adepts. Pale, eyeless beings whose evolution had optimized them for pure mental warfare. The device itself seemed underwhelming. A crystalline sphere 2 meters in diameter, pulsing with colors that human eyes couldn't perceive, but that caused intense discomfort in any hegemony species. The Mind Eater broadcasts directly into the threat recognition centers of sentient brains, the chief adept explained, his lipless mouth barely moving. It triggers cascading fear responses that override all other neural functions. No species has maintained organized resistance after exposure. Zakthar's secondary heart fluttered with unease. These humans have demonstrated unusual responses to fear stimuli. The chief adept's face remained impassive, irrelevant. The Mind Eater does not create fear. It is fear in its purest form. As the device was integrated into the flagship systems, Zakthar found himself hoping the adept was right. Because if the Mind Eater failed, the hegemony had no contingency plan. Lieutenant Wei Lin, head of China's Cyber Warfare Division, hadn't slept in 72 hours. Her underground command center in the ruins of Shanghai was a chaotic blend of military hardware and civilian electronics, staffed by an improbable mix of soldiers, hackers, and university professors. The signal is changing, she announced, studying the waveforms on her monitor. The aliens had been broadcasting various electromagnetic patterns since the invasion began, but this was different, more complex, almost organic in its structure. Professor Takahashi, a neurologist from Tokyo University who had escaped the initial attack, leaned over her shoulder. That pattern, it's remarkably similar to human brainwaves during extreme terror responses. Wei's eyes widened as understanding dawned. They're trying to induce fear directly into our brains. She spun to face the assembled team. Everyone, put on the modified helmets. Now. The crude devices, surplus military helmets lined with salvaged alien metals, wouldn't provide complete protection, but they might dampen whatever the aliens were attempting. As the Mind Eater reached full power, its effect rippled across Earth's population centers. Millions experienced sudden, inexplicable dread, a primal terror that defied rational thought. But instead of collapsing into paralyzed submission, as every previous species, had something unprecedented occurred. Humans adapted. In his command center, Zakthar watched the initial reports with satisfaction. Human defense positions showed sudden disorganization. Military communications became chaotic. The Mind Eater was working. Then something changed. Commander, Vexcrawl's voice held an unfamiliar note of confusion. The humans are responding. The tactical displays showed human forces reorganizing, adapting to the fear stimulus in real time. More disturbing, they had somehow identified the Mind Eater's broadcasting frequency and were retaliating with transmissions of their own. What are they sending back? Zakthar demanded. The answer came as the ship's communication systems automatically translated the human counter-broadcast. What emerged wasn't military communications or defensive protocols. It was screaming, wailing, sounds of terror and agony interspersed with discordant music that assaulted hegemony neural pathways like physical blows. Visual imagery flashed across the screens, grotesque faces, mutilated bodies, predators consuming prey. Concepts that had never evolved in hegemony psychology. Undeath, possession, eternal suffering. This is entertainment to them. Vexcroll whispered in horror, translating the embedded data. They call it horror. They expose themselves to these stimuli voluntarily. Throughout the fleet, hegemony crew members began experiencing symptoms unprecedented in their medical records. Uncontrollable tremors, visual hallucinations, catatonic states. The species that had never evolved to process fictional horror found themselves drowning in humanity's darkest imaginings. In Shanghai, Lieutenant Wei watched the alien transmissions weaken as her team bombarded the hegemony fleet with humanity's most disturbing creations, horror movies, haunting music, images generated by AI to maximize discomfort in alien neural structures. It's working, she breathed, watching the enemy ship's movement patterns become erratic. They can't handle it. Professor Takahashi nodded grimly. They evolved as prey species that escaped predators. We evolved as predators who learned to master our fears by confronting them. Their psychology has no defense against what we're sending. Wei's fingers flew across her keyboard, directing their next attack. Let's give them nightmares they never evolved to handle. On her screen, a message appeared from military command. Continue psychological offensive. Preparing physical counterstrike. Humanity thanks you. For the first time since the invasion began, Lieutenant Wei smiled. The hunters were becoming the hunted. She's ugly as sin, but she'll fly. Commander Jackson ran his hand along the hull of the U.S. Vengeance, formerly the nuclear submarine Ohio, now retrofitted with salvaged hegemony technology into humanity's first space warship. The vessel resembled nothing so much as a hideous metal leviathan. Its black hull was scarred with hasty welding marks, where alien propulsion systems had been grafted onto human engineering. Repurposed hegemony weapons bristled from improvised mounts. Radiation leaked from imperfect seals around the hybrid power core, requiring all crew to wear modified hazmat suits. In the briefing room, still bearing the submarine's original fittings alongside alien tech, 28 men and women studied tactical displays, showing the hegemony fleet in Earth orbit. Their faces bore the gaunt look of people who had accepted their own deaths days ago. This is a one-way mission, Jackson stated without emotion. The radiation exposure alone gives us 2 weeks tops. But if we succeed, we give Earth a fighting chance. Lieutenant Commander Rice, the Vengeance's tactical officer, highlighted the largest alien vessel on the display. The Inevitable Dominion, their command ship. That's our primary target. Our engineers believe their FTL drives follow similar principles to their short-range propulsion. If we can capture that technology intact, we bring it home, even if we don't make it back ourselves, Jackson finished. He looked at each crew member in turn. Last chance to back out. No one moved. Jackson nodded. Then let's go make history, or die trying. In the hegemony fleet, recovery from the psychological attack had been slow and incomplete. Nearly 30% of Zakthar's forces remained in medical stasis, their minds shattered by exposure to human horror concepts. The remainder operated at reduced efficiency, many requiring chemical suppressants to function. Perimeter sensors are operating at minimal capacity, Vexcroll reported. The human counter-broadcasts damaged neural interfaces fleet-wide. Zakthar's mandibles clicked in agitation. The hegemony's technological superiority relied on bioneural integration, systems that were now compromised by psychological trauma. Ships designed for crews of hundreds were being operated by dozens. The Mind-Eater lay dormant, its psychic adepts catatonic or dead. Maintain orbital bombardment of military targets, he ordered. We will break them through attrition, if nothing else. The tactical display flickered. Another system malfunction. Then stabilized to show an anomaly rising from Earth's atmosphere. Space debris from our earlier strikes, an analyst suggested. Trajectory and composition readings are inconsistent with functional spacecraft. Zakhthar dismissed the anomaly from his attention. The humans had no viable space combat capability. Their primitive orbital platforms had been destroyed in the first hours of the invasion. It was the most catastrophic miscalculation of his career. The Vengeance and its 7 sister ships, converted submarines and aircraft carriers named Revenge, Defiance, Certain Death, Last Stand, Devil's Bargain, Hail Mary, and Forlorn Hope, rose through the atmosphere on pillars of radioactive fire. Their hulls, never designed for space travel, groaned under the strain. Inside, temperatures reached 50 degrees Celsius as cooling systems failed. "Hegemony sensors have picked us up," Rise reported, sweat streaming down her face inside her helmet. "They're classifying us as debris." Jackson's grim smile was visible through his faceplate. "Perfect. All ships maintain emissions discipline. We're just space junk until we're right on top of them." The human vessels, crude and ugly against the elegant alien ships, continued their ascent. Inside the Vengeance, radiation alarms wailed constantly before being disabled by the crew. Minor systems failed by the minute. 3 engineers died when a coolant line ruptured, but their replacements stepped over the bodies without breaking stride. "Weapons range in 60 seconds, Rise announced. Still no indication they recognize us as threats. Jackson opened the fleet-wide channel. "This is Commander Jackson. Remember your training and your purpose. Earth has one shot at this. We are that shot." He paused, then added the words that would become legend in human history. "The prey becomes the predator today." Aboard the inevitable Dominion, the proximity alert finally blared. "Multiple objects on collision course," Vexcroll shouted. They're ships. Human ships." Zakhthar's 6 eyes widened in disbelief. "Impossible. They have no space combat capability." The tactical display told a different story. 8 vessels of primitive but recognizable design were among the Hegemony fleet, and they were accelerating. "Evasive action," Zakhthar ordered, but it was too late. The Vengeance slammed into the side of the inevitable Dominion at nearly relativistic speed, its reinforced submarine hull tearing through the alien vessel's elegant biomechanical skin. The impact was not a mistake or an act of desperation. It was the tactic. The grand chamber of the Hegemony Council gleamed with bioluminescent splendor, its vaulted ceiling a living map of their 1,000 conquered worlds. But today, an unprecedented sense of disquiet permeated the ancient hall as Councillor Tezekin called the emergency session to order. For the first time in 800 years, she began, her exoskeleton a dull gray that reflected her inner turmoil. The Hegemony faces a genuine military crisis. The 17 councillors, representatives of the founding species that had formed the Hegemony millennia ago, shifted uncomfortably on their adaptation thrones. Such an admission violated countless cultural taboos. "The situation at Sol 3 has deteriorated beyond acceptable parameters," Tezekin continued. "I yield to Military Overseer Dax Morrow for the briefing." The Overseer's hologram materialized in the center of the chamber, a battle-scarred veteran whose left arms had been replaced with prosthetics after a long-ago campaign. His carapace bore the ceremonial scars of 300 successful conquests. "Councillors," he began, his voice modulator set to a grave harmonic, "in the 54 days since first contact, the 14th Subjugation Fleet has sustained casualties exceeding 70%. The command vessel Inevitable Dominion is severely damaged. Commander Zakhthar reports that the humans have adapted our technology at a rate that defies all predictive models." He projected footage that caused several councillors to emit involuntary distress pheromones. Human boarding parties fighting through Hegemony vessels with salvaged alien weapons alongside crude melee implements. Axes, sledgehammers, even sharpened metal rods. The most disturbing images showed humans continuing to fight despite injuries that should have been immediately incapacitating. "Most concerning," Dax Morrow continued, "we have confirmed that humans have successfully reverse-engineered components of our propulsion technology. They will achieve interstellar capability within months, not centuries as initially projected." Councillor Vexnale, representative of the mercantile worlds, raised two of his four appendages in the gesture of urgent inquiry. What of our subject worlds? Has knowledge of this situation spread? Dax Morrow's compound eyes dimmed in the hegemony expression of deep concern. We have confirmed rebellions on 7 recently conquered systems. The Zentari and Novan sectors are reporting civil unrest. Intelligence indicates rebel elements are specifically citing the human resistance model in their communications. The council chamber erupted in alarmed vocalizations and stress patterned bioluminescence. Silence, Tezekan commanded. We must approach this crisis with reason, not emotion. She turned to Dax Morrow. Your recommendation, Overseer. His response was immediate and chilling. Implementation of the Omega Protocol. The chamber went deathly quiet. The Omega Protocol, complete planetary sterilization, had been authorized only twice in hegemony history, and never against a species with potential interstellar capability. The humans cannot be subjugated through conventional means, Dax Morrow continued into the silence. Their psychological makeup renders them immune to fear-based control methods. Their physical resilience makes them extraordinarily difficult to kill. Their adaptability allows them to weaponize our own technology against us. If they achieve interstellar travel, they represent an existential threat to hegemony stability. The holographic display shifted to show the schematics of the Annihilation Fleet, 9 planet killer vessels that represented the absolute pinnacle of hegemony destructive capability. We sacrifice the resource value of Sol 3, Dax Morrow concluded, but we eliminate the human contagion before it can spread further. In what remained of the inevitable Dominion's command center, Zakthar studied the humans with a mixture of horror and reluctant admiration. His once immaculate uniform hung in tatters. 2 of his 6 eyes were bandaged from injuries sustained during a human boarding action. Around him, his command staff operated with the mechanical efficiency of soldiers who had abandoned hope but not duty. The Council's response to his latest report appeared on his private terminal. Omega Protocol authorized. Annihilation Fleet dispatched. Hold position. Contain human threat at all costs. For the first time in his long military career, Zakthar questioned a direct order. Not from fear of death. He had accepted that possibility centuries ago, but from dawning understanding. Colonel Alexandria Winters led Strike Team Alpha through the emergency teleportation sequence, an untested technology cobbled together from captured hegemony transporters and human ingenuity. The disorientation was intense, like being turned inside out while falling through vacuum. Of the 30 elite soldiers who entered the teleportation chamber, 23 materialized inside the inevitable terminus. The others simply ceased to exist, their component atoms scattered across space. Acceptable losses, Winters stated dispassionately, checking her modified assault rifle. Primary target is the bridge. Secondary target is the Singularity Control Center. Move. The human strike teams, 12 in total, teleported simultaneously to each ship in the Annihilation Fleet, began their synchronous assault. They moved through alien corridors with predatory efficiency, using tactics developed specifically for hegemony vessel architecture. Aboard the inevitable terminus, Winters led her team through 3 defensive choke points. She took a glancing hit from an energy weapon that vaporized her left arm below the elbow, but continued advancing without breaking stride, applying a tourniquet one-handed while issuing tactical commands. Contact in 5. She announced as they reached the sealed bridge doors. Remember, we need the commander alive if possible. The breaching charges, designed from studied hegemony metallurgy, melted through supposedly impenetrable alloys. Strike Team Alpha poured onto the bridge, engaging the elite guard with brutal efficiency. Winters moved through the chaos with singular focus, her remaining hand steady on her weapon despite catastrophic blood loss. She reached Admiral Vex Medin, just as the last of his guards fell. Surrender, she stated, pressing her weapon against his thoracic cavity, where hegemony biology placed their primary heart. Order the fleet to stand down. The Admiral's 6 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture of profound disbelief. You cannot be here, he insisted. Our shields, our defenses, were designed to stop weapons, Winters replied, not people willing to die to reach you. Blood dripped from her severed arm onto the immaculate deck as she maintained her aim. Make your choice, Admiral. Now. Across the fleet, identical scenarios played out as human strike teams secured control of each planet killer vessel. The carefully choreographed annihilation protocol collapsed into chaos. In Earth's Situation Room, Lieutenant General Hernandez received the confirmation signals one by one. Strike Teams Alpha through Lima report success. All planet killer vessels secured. She turned to her staff, allowing herself the first smile in months. Send the second message, the one we prepared for the Hegemony Council. 3 days later, on the observation deck of the captured flagship, Colonel Winters, her wound regenerating in a modified Hegemony medical pod, showed Admiral Vex Madden what humanity had prepared while he thought they were merely fighting for survival. Those are colony ships, she explained, indicating the vessels being loaded in Earth orbit. We've already dispatched 17 to systems beyond your territory. Even if you had succeeded in destroying Earth, humanity would have survived. She manipulated the display to show the message being transmitted to the Hegemony Council, not threats of retribution, but a simple, terrible warning. We prefer peace. We offer coexistence, but remember this absolute truth. We will never submit, and we will never stop. The choice is yours. Vex Madden's exoskeleton had lost its luster. His once proud bearing collapsed into the posture of a being facing an incomprehensible reality. What are you? He asked finally. Winters considered the question, her eyes reflecting the starlight from the viewport. We're what happens when intelligence evolves in a predator instead of prey, she answered simply. We're what happens when a species confronts extinction so many times that overcoming impossible odds becomes instinct. She gestured toward Earth, still turning peacefully below despite the Hegemony's best efforts to destroy it. You thought we were primitive because we're young. Your mistake was not realizing that we're not primitive. We're just getting started.